The debt problem in Canada only seems to get worse. In fact, Canadians have some of the worst debt in the world for a country of its economic size. It's not going to end well because all of this debt is securitized and it's sold off to investors. Those who borrowed will default and quickly cause a chain reaction. Not good. You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. Today we are going to have our focus on Canada. Let's begin. Higher rates, bad news for many. This just isn't in Canada, of course, but this chart shows you the details of that. Poll finds increased borrowing costs would be a thorn in consumers' wallets. Doesn't take a genius to figure that out. Interest rates are historically low. If they rise, it's going to burden a lot of people. 43% feeling the effects of higher rates. They've barely gone up. 51% fear higher rates could hurt ability to pay debts. 33% agree that higher rates could push them towards bankruptcy, and I assure you it will. Now, I have way too many articles and charts to cover today. I'm just going to move through it really quickly. I don't want this video to go on too long. I respect your time. So looking at this here, we're talking about the amount of debt that's happening in Canada, and the Credit Counseling Society seeing an influx of clients as higher financing costs barely begin to bite people and find it harder to manage. Phone calls were up over 5%. Online chats increased by 40%. Debt loads are at a record and little in the way of savings to fall back on. Canadians may be caught off guard. I would say are caught off guard because housing markets have already begun to cool in many areas, and they're making other suggestions of what's happening here. We've been in a perfect storm for a number of years. Low interest rates encouraging borrowing and discouraging savings. People have been lulled into a false sense of security, something I talk about all the time. Now, he's talking about, the issue here. They're considering maybe Bank of Canada will increase rates. So we'll see when the next meeting. They didn't increase it this last time because, of course, they want to keep it here at this rate, 1.25%. We'll see what happens. Take a look at this, how they've just slowly but surely been notching up the interest rates at the slowest possible range that they can do so. Interest rates for mortgages have been rising over the past year as a result of moves by the Bank of Canada and fluctuations in the bond markets. It goes on to talk about this, looking at the issues of home sales. They haven't really done well as a result. People are worried. There's more stringent rules for many cities here. You have the foreign buyers tax and other things that have really started to, let's just say, soften the growth that is going on right now in Canadian real estate. A new poll suggests that a growing proportion of Canadians say that they're feeling the effects of higher interest rates. This connects in with that other graphic I was showing you at the beginning. I just wanted to note the fact that we are at 1.25% in Canada. And of course, mortgage rates, they're at 3%, 3.5%, and above that. But imagine what happens if it goes from 1.25% to 2% or even 3%. That's still historically extremely low. Where would mortgage rates be? Where would interest rates be on so many other things? What about financial transactions and corporations that have to deal with all of this? It's not good. Almost half of Canadian households don't feel financially prepared for further interest rate increases. It goes on to talk more about this. The poll that, they took this poll, this number of people here are suggesting that with $200, only $200 basically missing, and they would be literally unable to afford their monthly expenses. Canada households' debt to disposable income, look at where it has gone. 170%. It's just insane. And it's slowed down a little bit for this period of time. But it doesn't matter. Look at where it has grown over this period of time. And I would suggest to everybody that we're at the point now where you can only get so many mortgages on your home. There's a record amount of secondary mortgages. There's a record amount of credit card debt, student debt, and everything else. How much further can Canadians take it? Canada households debt to GDP, look at it growing just like everything else. Canadian real estate now presents one of the biggest risks to the financial system, but it may not be as bad as it sounds. Have no fear. The Bank of Canada released its quarterly assessment of the financial risks to the banking system. Near the top was household mortgages. BOC analysts expect half, look at this, half of mortgage rates will reset over the next year, mitigating much of the risk. Highly indebted households still present a significant risk, however. We have a big problem, and despite the fact that the Bank of Canada said, no, everything's okay, don't worry about it, that's usually when you have to worry. Interest rate resets. More than half of residential mortgage holders are expected to have their mortgage rate reset over the next year. 47% of mortgage holders will need to renew their mortgages. Think about that. They're renewing at a rate that's most likely higher than the one they had before. They couldn't pay before, $200 more, and they'd be in big trouble. Now they have to pay a higher interest rate. They're going to be in trouble, and I don't know why the information is right in their face, but the Bank of Canada won't even admit it. In the next 1 to 3 years, they expect another 31% of mortgages to renew. The other 22% will renew over the next 3 years. Different layers of risk, and that's certainly how I would suggest that everybody look at it. And I think that it's going to be, the problem comes up front. And unfortunately, rates might be maybe by that time next year, 2019. If anything, if we're still in sort of the same zone next year, which I don't know how we can be, but if it is, rates might be at 1.5%, 1.75%. You look at mortgage rates, they're going to be right around that 4% probably. How much debt can a person really withstand? Individuals don't have a printing press. Canada average hourly wage rate. Look at what has happened. I would say in real terms, this is just the way that you have to look at it, that ultimately individuals have less money, they have less real wealth today. This is interconnected, of course. Real housing prices, US versus Canada. You saw what happened in Canada, Vancouver, Toronto specifically, where the prices just kept rising. There were certain areas in Toronto that I know of that simply did not drop. If they did, it was so brief and so minimal that it ultimately didn't matter. It just kept on going. Now, as a national average, yes, there was this little tiny dip, but it doesn't matter. You can see that the US, clearly, it had some major deleveraging. Many investors came in and said, hey, we're going to pick up some cheap housing. There were so many empty homes, millions and millions of empty homes, and they came in, swooped it all up. Didn't happen in Canada, and of course, to say it's expensive is truly an understatement. Total Canadian loans secured against residential property. This should be setting off some alarm bells, but of course it never does. Total Canadian loans secured against residential property. You don't do this. Don't do this. This is so dangerous, and yet we're at a record high. Canada is in serious trouble. Household debt to income. Again, US had their deleveraging. Canada simply increased. And this is not really newer information, but you know where I'm headed with this. Mortgage debt has been growing, and this growth has been driven by a variety of supply and demand forces in the housing market. House prices have almost doubled in the past decade. requiring home buyers to borrow more to finance their homes. Today's historically low interest rates have started to rise. It's going to go on here. I'm not going to waste your time, but imagine that. Your house doubles in price every decade. That's not normal. Real estate shouldn't be increasing this rapidly. Historically, it is an anomaly, and we know that it is simply people taking on more and more and more debt, and it's going to present itself as an issue in the near future. If you found this video informative, please give me a thumbs up. I like to cover information about Canada. As a Canadian, I look around, I barely see any information like this, like you're getting today at the Money GPS. I cover issues for different cities in the US, different states in the US, looking at different countries in Europe and Asia, and I've done videos on Australia and the UK and South America and so on. So I like to have videos that are very specific on different areas across the world. Many people have requested. I've been, picking some information, trying to do this when I know that individuals living in a certain place that are my subscribers are looking and trying to get some good info. So I do try to bring that to you. If you appreciate it, please give me a thumbs up. Comment below and let me know what you think of videos about Canada or depending on where you live. I want to know if you value that type of information. Okay. Last but not least, if you found this video informative, I know that you will find my books, The Money GPS, and my newer book, Global Economic Collapse. If you want to flip through these books, all you have to do is go to Amazon. The links are in the description of this video. Click on it. It'll bring you over. You can actually look inside the book for yourself. Take care.